Hello and good morning, and thank you very much for joining us here at ITESOFT. Today we're looking at the importance of building a strong business case, and I'm delighted to take you through the information that we've prepared for you. Let's have a quick start by looking quickly at the agenda, followed by, in fact, our first poll question. So our agenda today is poll 1. In fact, there are 3 polls that we're going to ask you for your contribution to. And in between that, mixed in with that, we're talking about your company and where it is in the beginning of your project, which leads to the business case. What next to do? What would your company possibly expect from a business case? And we suggest a structure for you for that business case. And at the end, if you'd very kindly answer, push any questions that you have into the bottom right-hand corner, into the chat area, then we'll pick up on some questions and answers at the end of the session. So let's go straight away to poll number 1. And poll number 1, question number 1 is, have you ever written a business case to be used for the purchase of technology? And there are 3 answers here. Yes, recently. Yes, but a while ago. And no, never. And we're going to give you about 10 or 15 seconds just to select the answer on your choices there. And we can see that's coming in nicely. Just give you a few more seconds. And we're going to close that down now. So thank you for that. It just gives us a little bit of an insight. What we can see from our side here is that 74% say yes, you have written a business case, but not recently. 15% say yes, recently, and actually a relatively small percentage of 9% say no, never. So on that basis, perhaps I'm going to be teaching some of you how to suck eggs, but stay with me, hang with me, because if it's not recently, then business cases have changed a little bit in recent years. So, in the beginning, let's have a look at a slide on this one now. So, okay, you've been asked to explore e-invoicing, or perhaps you're the initiator of the project. What does e-invoicing or fully automated accounts payable mean? How does it work? What will the benefits be to the business, and what will it cost? On e-invoicing, I think it's important to start off by saying that that is not just the electronic submission of a PDF invoice. E-invoice involves the full handling of extraction, validation, matching, and export. Now, the chances are that some of those questions above will have been included in a brief given to you. What is much less likely is that you've been asked to submit the information in such a way that it can be used elsewhere in the business as well. In some fortunate instances, you may even have been given a dedicated format for returning the information or providing the information to your colleagues. So, as you start off, you'll need to conduct research to answer some key questions, and perhaps not just the ones initially posed by senior management. So, where to start on your assessment? As with so many tasks in life, getting a good start will make an enormous difference to the end result. Consider, if you know who is going to be driving the focus on technology, then you will be better equipped to supply information that is critical to their role and their way of thinking. And similarly, knowing what tools you may already have in the business ensures that the work you carry out won't be wasted and just a duplication of work that's previously been done. As I'm sure you can see with just a few points on your screens, start within the business. Talk to colleagues, talk to managers, talk to other departments, and dedicate real time to this with proper meetings, not just around the water cooler, but in meetings with agendas, detailed questions, and make sure that you get the answers. How can you know what technology tools may already be available if you don't ask, for example, the systems manager or the IT manager? And how will you get to know what the business is expecting if you don't talk to business heads and get their input as you start off with the project? So what next? Let's imagine that by now you've met with the key people in the business and you've documented their thoughts and needs. Where do we go next? What would you look at next? Well, to start with, use the information that you've already gathered to define what is important. Not just to you and your team, but to your manager, and take into account the rest of the business. Remember that the chances are that both IT and procurement will have a say on the final decision. You are much more likely to gain their approval at an appropriate stage in the process if you start off by factoring their thoughts and desires and needs in right from day one. Here's a little warning. Remember too that needs change. On this note, we would suggest an element of caution, because if our experience in delivering projects over 30 years has shown us one thing, that one thing is change happens. Your organizational priorities will almost always change and flex over the course of a project of this nature, so be prepared to be flexible. One of the points mentioned above is regarding marketing jargon. And don't worry, we'll come back to that shortly. Actually, I can already see a question in the chat log about this. So what happens if you don't have a predefined structure to work to? As we've already suggested, starting by understanding what you have and where there are gaps is vital to defining what you need to be examining. This allows you to deliver a high quality proposal that will answer all of the points on your screen and consider a host of others that we perhaps don't have time to explore here. As I'm sure you can see, the vast majority of what you will need to detail and define will actually come from within your business. Not just factual, but also consider how perhaps the organization perceives the interconnections between different departments and how different people have different views on precisely the same pain points. Now, on all of this, it may be that you have an internal expert that can help you with this work, or you may have found a vendor that's happy to provide you with a similar style of structure. At the end of the day, what is important is that you're capturing internal information, and it needs to be as accurate and careful as you have the time to make it. Now, earlier, we mentioned hard and soft benefits. These tend to have a very traditional split, but interestingly, it's one where technology often blurs the divide. Saving headcount within a cost center is clearly a hard and quantifiable benefit, as are the associated costs of national insurance, staff benefits, canteen, property costs, utility costs, expenses costs, IT overhead, and parking costs. These are just examples that when you dig a bit lower behind the cost of a person, you'll find that you can actually start to put numbers on these elements too. If the system improvement that you're suggesting also means that the number of invoices going into the business for coding and approval purposes reduces, then this is where there's a knock-on soft benefit. In the first instance of reducing distraction to the business, and secondly, if you talk to the right people, potentially that type of thing can also be valued. I have one or two instances where by assessing the percentage of invoices going into the business based on the time it takes for a person on average to look at, code and approve that query, and then multiplying that by the price or the cost per head of the people involved, you will be really dramatically impressed or frightened or concerned at just how much cost is actually in the business as a result of pushing invoices out to be approved. Here's another example for you to consider the differences between hard benefits and soft benefits, and that is improving department morale and reducing staff turnover. Now, this is traditionally a soft benefit, and as such, it's sometimes hard to justify and quantify. However, if you pop along and speak to the relevant department heads, they will nearly almost certainly have an indication to the cost of the business each time that they have to recruit and retrain somebody. Now, as such, you could provide a financial benefit to all of this. Of course, you won't be able to know for certain until after the project has actually gone live, whether this return on investment has truly come to full fruition. So we would suggest be a little bit conservative in some of those areas where you can't be absolutely sure that you will make savings. It's better to slightly underestimate your savings than to overestimate them. Well, thank you for sticking with us so far. Now we're on to our second poll question. Our second poll question is, have you in the past or are you currently exploring automation, and do soft benefits feature as a key driver for you? So when exploring automation, do soft benefits feature as a key driver? So the answer to that is either a yes or a no or a not relevant. So this concept of soft benefits, has it featured as a driver for you in the past or currently? Okay, wow, this is almost universal here. We've got 92% saying yes and 8% saying no. So quite clearly that's enlightening and delightful. I like that. So as we move on, nice heading here. This is called The Devil is in the Detail. Now, this listing is not in any particular specific order, because each of these points could be expanded into a multitude of subpoints. But let's pick out one or two of them. We have touched on some of the acronyms used to describe the act of capturing information. There are actually a host of different names, but the most common two are OCR, optical character recognition, and ICR, intelligent character recognition. So remember, understanding what the acronyms mean is just a start. You then have to ensure that you understand what these things actually do. And trust on us, there is an absolute world of difference from supplier to supplier of the understanding of what these things actually do. In fact, these lists are just the briefest of glimpses into what we mean, and they are typical of the conversations that we have with our prospects as they're looking in the journey towards becoming customers. We find that the key is to consider the detail of every piece of information that you obtain, making sure to understand what each of the potential suppliers is actually talking about, what they're demonstrating to you, what they're selling to you, what they're quoting for, and how their commercial offers are made up. On pricing, ask, challenge on the individual elements. Suppliers should be prepared to substantiate their product capabilities. They should help you to understand their licensing models, and they shouldn't be providing you with any hidden costs. But frankly, these subtleties sometimes escape even the most prudent procurement expert, if those experts are not themselves experienced in systems procurement. In other words, the devil is in the detail, and I can't help but advise, take your time and ask. Okay, and earlier a couple of you asked what particular acronyms mean. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. I'll come back to that. So typically, what might your company expect from a business case? Well, let's challenge this heading and say, is there a simple answer to this? Well, possibly, but not if you don't start off by asking the right questions. So what you do next truly makes an impact. I'm going to have a look at our next poll question. It's very pertinent at this stage, and it says, does your organization have a predefined document or structure for business cases that you can use? And the three answers are yes, it is defined and is readily available. No, as far as I'm aware, we do not have a templated document, and I am unsure. So if you wouldn't mind providing me with your feedback on that, that would be helpful. I'll leave that for a few more minutes. I'm actually getting a surprising answer here, so just give it a few more seconds. Okay, we're closing that down, and almost 90% of you are saying that you are unsure as to whether there is a document which is predefined or structured for business cases. And the reason I say that's unusual is because there's been a great understanding of soft benefits before, and there's been a great understanding in the first poll question about business cases generally, but there's a deficiency or distancing between people having conducting business cases and knowing whether they are available in their own organisation. So I think a pointer out of that question is, here's a little task for you. Go away and start asking any questions, because if it's the case that you're going to be looking at a business case, at generating a business case, that has got to be a start point for you all. So thank you for your answers on that. That's poll question number 3. Okay, so let's have a look at a potential structure. In the absence of structures from your own organisation, we can set one forward for you. The final format will depend on the organisation and management requirements. One that we've recommended for use is indicated here. Before we start, I think you might also have noticed a recurring theme. The theme is define, detail, and analyse. A little bit of more detail on these headings. Define each of the sections and make use of the internal information that you have gathered to ensure that your document makes sense and adds value across the departments that will be affected. Under detail, do not be tempted to rush through or fail to value any of the information that you have gathered when researching. What might seem like a relatively trivial piece of detail to someone in finance may be really vital to IT or procurement, and vice versa, of course. And on the heading of analyse, when you've conducted your research and spoken to the departments involved, you are now the best placed person to analyse the information at each stage. We suggest a summary is a good idea after each key section, and this allows the management team to view the core information and understand it in a much easier fashion. On this slide, we have a selection of potential subheadings, and there are more to come yet. Now, we're not saying that these headings are precisely what you should use, but they do give a good flow to a document and provide a logical journey for the reader. So as we continue this theme, here are a few final points we would recommend to be included in a business case. You can see that fundamentally these 4 points are your recommendations and the reasoning behind reaching your decision. Whether you were originally tasked with putting a recommendation forward or not, as we have just said, you are the person that has the most knowledge, understanding, and has considered the most aspects during the course of the research. You are uniquely placed to offer insight into the department, and the company can gain benefit from your recommendation. Do not be frightened to make recommendations. We would suggest that indeed it would be strange if there wasn't some form of recommendation included in a document of this nature, so go for this in a strong way. As you will be recommending a preferred solution or more than one preferred solution in a complex environment, now you can move to greater detail. Revisit each of the original identified issues or challenges and show how they can now be eliminated or improved by the solution. For each of those issues or challenges, if possible, assess both the costs and the savings, the time required, and any associated risks. And if it's a soft benefit, indicate the advantages even if they can't be specifically costed or valued. Overall, clearly show the business benefits, and my advice would be to calculate a payback period or break-even point. At that stage, project your figures to your company horizon, and this does vary to perhaps a 3 or a 4 or a 5 year horizon, make sure that you estimate the savings that can be achieved beyond the break-even point. It's not unusual in the business cases that I present to clients that cost savings more than double the original investment in the software and services to implement a project. Now, as you can see from the slide, one of the sections we suggest dedicating some real time to is on internal impacts. The reason for this is that this is where the senior management team will be looking for action. Yes, for sure, budget is very important and understanding the solution equally so. But for senior management, a lot will also ride on the practical implications and impacts of this project, such as resource changes and new styles of working. If you've failed to talk to other teams in your business, this will cause problems exactly at this stage. You won't be able to advise what sort of time or resource implications your project has if you haven't asked the relevant questions. So as we draw to a close today, we have set out to give you some serious food for thought about creating a business case that is fit for your purpose to move a project through to supplier selection and implementation. Hopefully, some of this information will prove invaluable to you and your teams. Most important, we believe that you may now be in a better position to start understanding that you should deliver a business case when you're tasked with researching something of this nature. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That concludes the formal part of the presentation today. We are going to have a quick look at any questions and answers. And some people have been a bit lax in providing some questions for us. We have two that have come in. Perhaps you were so entranced by the content that you haven't had time to do the chat button. But don't worry. The two questions that I have had is, why have you taken the trouble to highlight marketing jargon? Thank you for that. Well, this is very interesting. We've been following the trends that have changed in the marketplace recently with regarding how people research new topics, new subjects, new issues, new challenges. And when we say it like that, perhaps you won't be surprised to hear that the vast majority of information that people gather now is actually harvested by themselves and often by using online resources, much less now than it was previously, where market research was carried out by actually meeting with suppliers. And the trouble with that approach is that often what you're reading and seeing is, more often than not, led from the marketing operations of those organizations. And there is a slight danger here, one that you have to be acutely aware of, which also means that often that information is quite future-facing. It can be quite visionary. Obviously, it's painted in a very positive light. And honestly, when it comes down to the detail, perhaps it's not necessarily what is the true reality of the product and company capability and what is able to be delivered. So I would say to you, marketing jargon has to be carefully considered. Honestly, we all do it ourselves, but we do try and be transparent and open about the reality of it. And when you're doing your research, although that's the trend, don't ignore the opportunity that a face-to-face meeting with a supplier can literally be worth 1,000 pictures. Okay, what's our next picture? Our next question. All right, we have just this second question. The second question is, do technology providers use different terms for the same thing? Okay. In a simple answer is yes. Quite early in the presentation, we looked at the definition of e-invoicing to say that it is more than just sending in an electronic PDF attached to an email. For some companies out there, that is exactly what e-invoicing is. That's what they call it. That's what they do. The reality is there's definitions by official bodies, and they will tell you that e-invoicing is not just the sending in, but also the handling and the ability to interrogate and track an invoice through a system such that a supplier can get feedback on the status of that. So there's a typical example of what is two different interpretations of the same title. I would say to you, go into your conversations with eyes wide open and be very careful to question what exactly is meant. I can give you another example if you like, which is a 100% recognition, OCR. Some suppliers will claim they can offer 100% OCR recognition. Is that the same as being able to interpret it, extract, validate, and handle the information that's there? So those are the sort of areas that you need to be aware of. I should qualify my previous comments here by saying that there are things that are similar from different suppliers, but where there are some very defined things that you hear, you will need to really just be careful to interpret what the supplier is actually doing with their technology and how you can use that to generate the benefits that you are yourselves looking for. Thank you very much. Any other questions come in? No, that's our questions for today. Okay, relatively swift and easy webinar. So thank you. Our next webinar is Improve Supplier Relationships with a Digital Platform. And we're holding that on June the 21st, which is a Thursday. And what time is it? Click onto our website, go to resources. You'll see our list of forward webinars at that place on our website. But June the 21st, how to improve supplier relationships, perhaps using a digital platform. And thank you very much for your attendance today. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye for now.